Ed, so thanks for having me here today. It's great having a
Thank you,
conversation.
Roger. It's great to have a conversation here today.
Yeah, so listening to you and Travis speak about WDG, I'm really excited about it. I'm glad to be part of it. Got some follow-up questions. I'm just curious about your perspective.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to chat.
Yep.
That's the point of WDG. It's really a space for conversation, so let's have the conversation.
So just very simply, and I might try to play the Let's Stump Ed show here. So WDG, I'll go backwards, governance. That sounds like a pretty heavy-handed thing.
Yeah, so governance sounds very heavy, and it sounds like, oh my God, this is going to slow things down. It almost sounds like government. Someone
Yes.
actually mispronounced it and said, oh, you're talking about the world digital government. And I was laughing in my head, saying, yes, yeah, it does sound terrible in some sense, or not terrible. Maybe terrible is not the right word. It definitely sounds heavy.
Are you looking, for example, for WDG to actually govern AI?
So that's a great question. I think WDG is an open forum for beneficial, open, and responsible use of AI. And it's really a forum. It's a space for collaboration. And it's really a group of volunteers for now, largely policymakers, regulators, folks like yourselves. And the hope is that at some point, all the 8 billion people are part of this effort, because it's about the world.
Yeah.
So the idea is that at some point, we all come together and we all sort of have a common view of how we want our digital lives to be governed. Because there was a day when there was no digital life, you were your physical life. And today, your phone is kind of your digital life, a big part of your memory, and now a big part of your thinking is your phone. And it's become an extension of you. So we are digital beings. And if you think about the algorithms that sit in all these digital social media services that you use, there's a part of you in there. So you are not just you, the physical person sitting here, you're also the digital you, which is partly in your phone. If you have multiple phones, you're across 3 different phones, and a part of you is sitting inside those algorithms which are in the different websites that you're communicating with. So you have already become digital.
Yep.
And you're physically here. And it would be pretty scary if you were to just be completely inside your phone. You'd feel locked and trapped inside. So we don't necessarily want a world where we all feel trapped. At least I don't. And then the question is, how many of us feel comfortable saying, oh, we'll just package you in a phone and ship you off, right? I don't think anyone's that interested in that. Well, at least I'm not. And so people who are not interested in being shipped and packaged along with their phone may want to have this conversation.
So actually, you just brought up the next point. So far, you talked a lot about AI, but D is digital, and you started talking about digital. So what's the distinction? Is WDG about digital, or is it about AI?
So it's a great question. It's really about data more than anything else. In fact, we initially started with the thought that WDG was going to be World Data Governance, and then it was just so uncool.
That sounds so sexy, yeah.
It sounded so uncool. No one wanted to have that conversation because as much as it is about data, people understand the word digital. When you say data, people often confuse it with the telecom provider's data connection. So it's confusing a little bit. While we all understand what data intuitively is, it's a little hard to wrap your head around. Digital is sort of as a broader connotation when it comes to artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, the future as we see it, all the neurological devices that are coming in, things that will directly either be implanted in your brain or EEG-like devices. We know of various efforts around the world from Neuralink by Mr. Musk to various other technologies that are coming through.
Got it. You're reading my mind. So you mentioned world, and we're getting to the world part. So a lot of this conversation seemed like very first world problems. Right, we're all connected, we're in it, but there's a good part of the world where they're having problems just getting water, right? And there's not that many computers around. So the world part of WDG, how do you see that working?
If you were to think of world digital governance, right now we're talking about the world where digital exists. There's 2 billion people that are not on the internet. And you can be pretty certain that almost every large world leader or corporate leader like Mr. Musk or Mr. Zuckerberg, they are trying to ensure that that is happening. They are working really hard to set up these satellite networks or go to countries which are third world and establish, whether it's telecom networks or satellite networks, to ensure that digitalization reaches every last person on earth. That's a different effort, and there is enough commercial value in doing that, so people are doing it. And so I don't think there is a need for another person like myself or anyone else to come and start to do that, because there's already corporate leaders, world leaders, responsible government leaders who see the business value, commercial value, or simply the governmental need for governance to ensure that internet or access to the digital world that we have reaches everywhere. So that is going to happen, irrespective, right? And we've seen, when the internet started, there were 2 billion users. Now there's 5 or more. And so as that continues, at some point we'll have everybody. And then the question is, no one's really talking about governance at a global scale to bring it all together. And the governance efforts, largely because we live in a world separated by countries, the governance efforts are limited to the countries. No government has a mandate to go and do this for another country. So everybody's doing their thing. But then there's 200 efforts, at the least, given 200 plus countries. So the question is, how do you bring that together? And then some countries can't even afford to have this conversation at a meaningful level because it's economically not viable to have that conversation.
Yeah. That leads me to ask the question, does this end up feeling more like a UN, where you got all the countries all sitting around convening?
I know I've been asked, because the WDG logo has a wreath, so people do say, oh, is that something to do with the United Nations? The wreath is kind of a symbol of peace and love. And we live in a quantum world where, quantum energy is love, and it's permeating all around. And to the point Travis was making earlier, it is a lot about, can we all sort of love each other and live? Shah Rukh Khan, who's one of the famous actors in India, he's the merchant of love, right? He goes and selling love. That's why, he's the most famous actor in India, has hundreds of millions of people watching his movies. So I think the message of love and the power of love is very profound. And I think world digital governance, in some sense, is about that, at the very core of it, right? And data is just a mathematical representation. I'm sure some mathematician one day is going to come up with an equation for love.
That would be interesting. I'd be interested in finding out what that means.
Yeah. Metaphysics says everything's based on math.
Yeah. Now, I got to ask this because every forum that I've seen where someone's talking about another one of these organizations around AI, right, this question gets asked. So what's your personal benefit? Do you benefit from this commercially at all, directly or indirectly?
As far as I'm personally concerned, or Intellibus is concerned, the value is meeting a lot of interesting people. So obviously when you meet a lot of interesting people, other things can happen, right? So there's a natural benefit that may happen as a consequence of that, but that is not the intent and reason to drive this. Intellibus, for example, doesn't really have a sales or a marketing team, so we don't spend a lot of the money in that because we've been very fortunate. We've had some great clients, we do great work, and we get paid as a consequence of that. And we continue to dot the I's and cross the T's, and that pays our bills. And so we've always focused on delivery, right? So we've never spent money in sales and marketing, and that's the only reason we have the surplus money to actually just spend on something like this.
A lot of the topics that we talk about are pretty technical. In the conversations, you mentioned world leaders, folks that made their money, but then also, for the masses. WDG, who is it geared for? Like, who can be a member of WDG? What kind of people are we looking to involve?
It's very early, and we're sort of still formulating that. We're having those conversations. As we go through this journey, those answers will emerge. But like anything, you have to have a set of principles. If you don't have a set of growth principles, they say if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, or you'll fall for anything. So in essence, we have to have a set of principles. And so that's kind of the phase we are in. We're crystallizing those principles. There are some things which we sort of hold very dear and close to our hearts. Like, for example, selling data is a guardrail that you have to put around ethics. You say, oh, we're going to be responsible of our data, but you don't put a guardrail saying, oh, and therefore we won't sell data. It's not good enough, right? So there are some core principles, and that was the initial idea. In Travis' conversation, I mentioned that we want to have a mechanism where data itself is free and open, like Wikipedia. So the data is not owned by anybody, controlled by anybody. So that's a big part of the conversation. As we go through this journey, what the framework is, who needs to be involved, will evolve. At the stage where we are, obviously we're not looking for a mechanism where this becomes a pay-for-play. And we're being very, very careful and measured. And we're meeting world leaders and executives all the time. And there's always that connotation that if someone supports us, then they can influence the agenda of something as important and as global and at vast a scale as world digital governance. And so it's extremely important for us to be mindful and watchful of that. That is not to say that if we were to host a conference or an event, we would have a problem with JP Morgan putting their logo on the side, or any bank for that matter. The point of it is that we don't want and influence on the agenda.
Right.
So a foundation from a very rich individual in this world wants to support this, and therefore people see it as a mechanism to steer it to the AI company that they own. That would be terrible. And so our initial effort is really to go out to individuals, because it's harder to game when there's lots of individuals involved. It's easier to game when there's a few corporations involved, because then it becomes a clique, a cartel, right? So it's extremely important for us to have the support coming from individuals. Of course, foundations can come in as long as they can be not pushing a specific agenda, or they're highly committed to the idea of open data. And so organizations that are about open data, open algorithms in the public domain, they're welcome to come and help and support.
Got it. Some of the stuff that we've talked about in the last few weeks, proof points and things like that, I don't know if you're at a point where you want to talk about it or not, but sometimes we see, as an example for these efforts, experiments or test cases to show, hey, here's, if you take these principles together, here's what we can do for the world. Are we looking for stuff like that?
Without naming the individual, I had a conversation with the CEO of one of the large policymakers in the world that is responsible for national policy and security. And their question to me was, how are you going to get China? You can start this effort in the US stateside, or you can start the effort in Europe, you'll get the European Union. And at some point, China always wants to do their own thing, because it's great. I mean, it's about establishing their identity. Nothing wrong with that, right? And they're a great nation. I respect them. And they have a different way of life. They have a different way of conducting business, and which is great. They have to see value in being part of this effort. And they have to see that this adheres to their values. In essence, one of the challenges we've had in anything at the world or global scale is conflicting values, because everyone has a different way of conducting life, and you can't tell people how to live.
Right.
So if we were to truly bring world digital governance, it's truly about creating a common set of values.
Right.
And it's hard, because people have very different values
Right.
and value systems. And this has been the challenge, whether it's been governments and revolutions all across the world. So how do you establish a common set of values? So at the very core of world digital governance is bringing this conversation amongst world leaders who have influence and power today, whether it's in the governmental side or on the corporate side, and establishing a core set of values that we can all adhere to, that we can all hold true as a world. The reward is the greater benefit for us all. And the risk is the detriment. We all know what can happen.
Right.
So if we can bring the world together with a common set of values and common set of principles, or rather I should say when we can bring the world together with a common set of principles and a common set of values, we can then have a very solid foundation on which to build upon world digital governance.
So essentially a safe, open forum governed by the common values for us all as humanity, to really look at the space and see how we can actually benefit mankind, as opposed to reap a profit here or there or impose a value on some.
Nothing is wrong with profit. I've lived in America for the last 20 years. It's a great land of opportunity. There's nothing right or wrong with one or the other model. All the models work. Some work for some time, and then they change the model in the world. So I think all models are great. They have point in time and context. The question is, sometimes the pendulum swings too hard on one side,
Right.
and it becomes hard. I read long ago in a book which said that life is just a systole and diastole of economic exchange. So and it's like a heartbeat, right? And it's like the concentration of wealth and the distribution of wealth. And that's what keeps happening cyclically all around the world. And in essence, if we understand that fundamental economic wave or economic nature of the universe, or the cyclical nature of the universe around us, then we can definitely build around that and make a better and a safer place, and especially in the world of AI, something more responsible.
Yep. That's great. Thank you.
Well, Roger, love to have a conversation now that you're here about what is your interest, what prompted you to think about world digital governance and volunteer for this effort.
Yeah, for me, it's really the observation that I think we're entering into a generation where the machines are finally going to be able to give us back more value than we put in. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of folks over the last several years about, if you take a look at our relationship to machines, we're essentially just data entry clerks for the machine. And the machine's just basically tabulating and reflecting back what it is. For the machines to get smart enough to actually, I don't want to say think, but to process in a way where it's bringing back things that I can't already tell, right? It's not just an automation of some sort. I think that changes the game, and it brings a different level of value. It changes how we live. And what's important around that for me is to make sure that there's enough innovation, a level playing field out there, in a sense, around data, especially around what we have access to, so that when we embark on this journey to get to a better, easier, happier life, we're not also owned by 3 or 4 companies out there.
That is definitely a risk, right? So thanks for calling that out. Those who are kind of trying to understand who's involved in the WDG effort, I'm sure people will be curious as to your background and your credentials and what value can you bring to World Digital Governance effort.
So I'm Roger Hugh. I am in the financial services industry, have been working in technology as well as the business side for the better part of the past 25 years. Types of problems I look at generally is around, how do we be more productive? And a lot of times it's with respect to selling or processing things. One consistent theme behind everything I'm doing is really how do you apply technology to give people better access to data and insights so that they're not out there tabulating everything. That's one set of things that I've been involved in throughout these 25 years. A lot of my work has been in wealth management, capital markets. I've had the opportunity in my career to work with AI when Watson was first founded at IBM. I was at IBM for 10 years. And so for a few years there, I had firsthand knowledge and experience in actually developing out products that are smart, dealing with the issues with respect to data, with respect to tuning algorithms, and also really kind of seeing how easy it is for people to get carried away with, here's like a seed of possibility, but then we start imagining all sorts of things and projecting things into it that, the technology may not be there yet. So this is a very interesting endeavor for me because I want to take what I've learned and hopefully apply it so that everybody else can benefit from that. So that's kind of, what WDG is for me.
Well, Roger, thanks for sharing that. Roger Hugh, everybody, and thank you.
Mm-hmm.